Welcome to the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Irishman, Englishman and Scotsman Football Podcast. My name is JP and joining me as always, Finno, Joe and Kev. How are we doing, lads?
Yeah, good.
Absolutely splendid, mate.
Good. We're star of the Premier League action back again on Saturday and kicking off at Stamford Bridge at 1:30 Central European time. Chelsea against West Brom. Right back into it. Surely a home win, Finno, against a probably already relegated West Brom.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I don't really expect any real dramas here for Chelsea. The only kind of potential hiccup here is the fact that it's the early lunchtime kickoff, which can always spring a bit of a surprise, especially after internationals. But I know that Chelsea have a few injuries, but, you know, Tuchel's team have been so good at just finding ways to make it work that I just don't really see anything other than 3 points for Chelsea here.
I think so as well. I think it's always tough to know, isn't it? Like, has the international break been good or bad for certain clubs? I think for Chelsea, some of their players have done really well in the international break. Mason Mount was brilliant for England. I think I saw Havertz score for Germany. But you wonder if, you know, playing 2 or 3 games when a fair few of West Brom's players probably won't have done, will they be tired or not? But yeah, you have to say Chelsea should be far too strong for them.
Yeah, it won't be enough to make a difference, but I'm sure Chelsea will be one of those teams who just would have loved to have carried on playing. You know, I think it definitely won't help them, this little break. But look at Chelsea. I mean, this could end up being a really good season for them, couldn't it? I mean, look where they are in the league. Who's to say they can't win the Champions League as well? I mean, this could be a mega season for them in the end. It's incredible, really, considering where we are just like, you know, 2 or 3 months ago.
Who have they got in the Champions League?
They got Porto, haven't they?
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you'd fancy them to definitely come through there. This fixture, actually, the reverse fixture, lads, was, if memory serves me right, was absolutely bonkers. I think West Brom went 3-0 up at half time and Chelsea came back to 3-3 late on and could have won. It was a crazy game, but that was a very different Chelsea and a very different West Brom. So yeah, I think we're all going to go for a home win. 4 o'clock kickoff on Saturday at Ellen Road. Leeds against Sheffield United in the Yorkshire Derby. Leeds back among the goals and back among the points against Sheffield United. They're relegated, managerless, surely going to go one way. And just looking at the table, I mean, you know, there's still a few games left. And someone like Leeds or Aston Villa could be saying after the international break, right, let's give this a go, have it a crack. We're only 7 or 8, 9, 10 points off, you know, Europa League place. Is it possible? Who knows? But I think Leeds will get the win here. Finno?
Yeah, I think you're very optimistic with thinking that Leeds can manage to mount a European challenge. I think that this is a bit of a nothing game in the grand scheme of things, to be honest. You know, Leeds are safe, Sheffield United are down. I think most of Sheffield United's players will be playing to try and win a move to a team like Leeds. I expect Leeds to win comfortably, but that Jekyll and Hyde Bielsa team can spring a surprise, no doubt.
I think the most interesting thing about this game is what we learned during the international break, that Dembele is like a massive Leeds fan. I really love that. Patrick, did you see that story? Patrick Bamford revealed that he's spoken to him. He says that, yeah, Dembele watches every single game and is just like huge fan. Fantastic.
Apparently, Erling Haaland is a massive Leeds fan as well. So they've got some very high-profile supporters.
He'll be claiming to be a Man City fan before too long. Don't worry.
Yeah, and also Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. Is also a Leeds fan, surprisingly enough. Okay, 6:30, potentially the game or the second highest or biggest game of the weekend. Leicester against Man City, third against first. Leicester in a good run of form. City, of course, on fire. You know, I mean, Leicester troubled most teams, but I just, you know, can't see them troubling City. Then again, Kev, like you said about the international break, it's hard to know which way it's going to go. The big news from this fixture, lads, which I'm sure we'll talk about, is Sergio Aguero has confirmed that he's leaving at the end of the season. And immediately, no one's really asking where is he going to go. It's who's going to replace him. You know, is it Haaland? Is it Kane? Who's it going to be? I've even heard the rumor of Danny Ings, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. But, you know, surely the money's on Haaland.
I probably think they'd prefer Haaland over Danny Ings, I would imagine, with his injury record.
Okay, or Harry Kane.
I mean, I'm not sure they can afford Harry Kane, to be honest. I just think trying to get Harry Kane out of Spurs, Daniel Levy is a notoriously tough negotiator. I can't imagine the amount of money you'd need to get Harry Kane out of Spurs. But I mean, Sergio Aguero, what a player. He's been one of the top players in the league for 10 years now. It'll be really hard to replace. He always seems to score the big goals in the big games. Obviously, the goal that scored them the title. I've heard a lot of people say that the timing of this is a little bit strange, and it makes you wonder whether this has come from Aguero himself, who's maybe got something lined up that he wants to sign for someone in the next couple of weeks. I'd imagine him to either go to Spain or back to Argentina. But in terms of who they can bring in to replace them, I think Haaland for sure.
Is Aguero the greatest Premier League striker ever?
I think he's in the top 3, Finno, behind Henry in second and Alan Shearer in first.
If you look at Aguero's goals per game, it's like he's had 500 games exactly during his career club-wise, and he's comfortably averaged better than a goal every 2 games. I think it's like 278 goals he's scored in his 500 games. He's not only done it at such a high level, but the consistency that he's done it over those 10 years for Man City and the 5 years before for Atletico, I think he's criminally underrated by a lot of fans in terms of his importance. The only blotch that he's got in his CV is probably not winning the Champions League, but you wouldn't put it past City to win it this season.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It blows me away sometimes because the thing is, outside England, he is regarded in those, in the terms that you're talking about. There's no one's got any in Spain, for example. And all right, maybe Spain's not that good an example, but where they do love him more than in most places probably, but they absolutely do think of him as that sort of class of player, and it is curious. I wonder if it's just something about England. England tends not to rate Argentine players, very highly or as highly as they should be. Really, it always seems to be a bit of a blind spot. Maybe it's something to do with the media, but I agree. I think he's been an incredible player. But I suppose hats off to Guardiola really, because I think, Joe, you alluded to it, at the start. That of course, you miss a player like him, but you sort of get the feeling that Man City and Guardiola have got themselves in a position where they're not going to miss him that much. It feels like they've created a way of playing without him, and it really will be interesting to see what happens next. Whether maybe a player like Kane or maybe a player like Haaland perhaps wouldn't fit into whatever it is that Guardiola is thinking of. So there may be a surprise or two.
That's a very good point, actually, Kev. It's quite possible that we're all talking about who's coming in. Is it going to be Kane? Is it going to be Haaland? It's quite possible they don't sign anybody. They've proved to be the best team on the planet so far this season, for the most part, without a recognised striker. Gabriel Jesus has also been injured along with Aguero, but still they find a way to play this flawless, PlayStation football, but without a recognised striker.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely spot on. I was going to say exactly the same. Like, they could end up winning 4 trophies this year without a recognised striker. And, if you're someone like Erling Haaland, are you looking at this thinking, do they actually need me? And he may end up going somewhere else. But yeah, I agree. Criminally underrated. He's been an incredible player, scored some amazing goals, and it'll be a massive miss to the league. And for City to lose Silva, Company, Aguero in the space of 2 or 3 seasons, and how they've replaced them has been remarkable.
It just takes you back to that Guardiola rebuild. But I suppose taking it back to the Leicester game, I think probably these are the 2 teams that play the best football in the league. I think that's quite comfortably safe to say. I can see Leicester sneaking a result here, I think, just purely again because of coming back from international break. If City aren't completely back and focused on the job, I think over the next 8-9 games, I can see Leicester beating United to second in the table. And I don't think they'll maybe take all 3 points here, but I think it could be quite a high-scoring draw.
I think you're right about it being such an interesting game in that sense, because I think if Leicester City, if they do get a win, I think that's it. I think they're through. Obviously not mathematically, but I think they've got that top 4 place pretty much nailed down if they do it. And so they really will. They've got everything to go into, to absolutely play their hearts out for this game. I think 3 points here. That's it. There'll be no worries about what happened last season, and I think they'll go on. And I think you're right. I think they'll have every chance of getting second after that. So yeah, huge. I'm really looking for. It's one to savor, isn't it? It's one of those games where you sort of think, oh God, please don't be a down 0-0, because you really want it to be a sort of a 4-2 or something like that. Would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it hopefully will be a high scoring game. Both teams play, free flowing football, and Leicester at home certainly they're tough to beat. Okay, moving on, Kev, to the game of the weekend, 9:00 Saturday night, Arsenal Liverpool. I mean, both these teams, there's 4 points between them. You were saying earlier on, Fino, that obviously Leeds have no chance of European football and the season's over. I think whoever loses this will be in exactly that boat. I think if anyone has any, slim hopes, or even I wouldn't say slim, 5 or 6 points of fourth place, but, hopes of getting to that Champions League place, they have to win this game. I don't know what the injury front is. I mean, obviously both teams have a lot of players out on international duty. The only thing that came back, I mean, it could be tongue-in-cheek, was Mo Salah saying in the future he'd like to play in Spain, and Real and Barca were, great teams, but that's what he's going to say anyway. How do you see this one going, Kev?
I think it's hard, isn't it? Nothing's really changed at Liverpool. I mean, they had one sort of positive result just going into the break, which will have helped. Positives, I suppose Trent Alexander-Arnold's got a bit to do, right? He's got a bit to prove now over this last stretch, and that's probably a pretty good thing, actually. I mentioned in the Wolves game that I thought his defending was really, really sound, like really good, and I think there'll be maybe let's see what Klopp's been up to, but I think we'll see a little bit of a sort of back to basics. Firmino apparently is buzzing around again. He's fit. Mane didn't look too bad. Should have scored the other night, but anyway, looked fairly tasty. But nothing really has changed. Still really, still not a very exciting midfield team. Not a very solid in defence team. Attack still misfiring. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if this ended up being like a 1-1 or something.
I think Jota also had a pretty good international break as well, and I think sometimes, I've talked about the negatives of the international break, and I promise I will stop harking on about this. But sometimes that refresh will also do the players the world of good. Spoke about it before that we as fans have really no idea what goes on behind closed doors. And I can just imagine that, the simple things like not having to speak English on the training pitch could really make all the difference in enjoying your football again. It's a different tactical situation. You feel maybe more wanted. I just think that Liverpool, the players really haven't enjoyed their football in a while. And that international break, Trent Alexander-Arnold being allowed to not go away with England and just have a bit of a break, Jota be able to get up to fitness, that could really help Liverpool in this. If Arsenal play the way they did in the first 30 minutes against West Ham, I think Liverpool will have, all the shots on target and all the goals that they could possibly want, because the way that they played in that first half hour against West Ham was truly atrocious.
I read that interview with Salah, actually. I saw it this morning. It's obviously Marca got it in Spain, and it's a good interview for them. The stuff about wanting to play in Spain was the least, committal thing that any player has ever said. It was like, one day in the future, who knows? I hope to be playing for many, many years, so you never know, kind of thing. It really was that sort of answer. I'm sure he worded it very carefully himself, but it was just I was waiting for it to filter back into England to, I want to play in Spain in the future, which he left the door ajar. But I think I was dreading it a little bit because there's been a lot of talk about whether his agent or whether he is pushing for a move. So I was looking out for those signs about whether he was really trying to drop something about angling for a move. But in this case, I don't think he did. I think he was very careful. Look, I've spoken about it before. I think he's a fantastic player, and I hope he stays at Liverpool forever. And especially with a few doubts about some of the others, he's the player I'd love to think that he would stay and they could build something out of. But he's like everyone else; he hasn't been in form. So you want to see him come out and really, there's still a chance. Liverpool are still in the Champions League. We shouldn't forget that. There's still a chance that this season could end quite well. Still could end up with fourth. It could still end up with them going to Istanbul. Like, you never know. I don't think it's very likely, but you never know. So if they could come out after this break, score two, have one of those first halves, like you said there, Fino, they've done it in the past against Arsenal. Maybe they'll be 5-1 up at half time. And suddenly it'll be like, 3 or 4 years ago again when it was Brendan Rodgers and Raheem Sterling and, and the rest of them and Luis Suarez, doubt it. But, all right, come on, let's live in hope. 4-1 at half time, that's where my money's on.
Believe the hype. No smoke without fire. Salah to Real Madrid and Aguero to Barcelona next season. You heard it here first. Moving on to Sunday. Early game, Joe. Southampton against Burnley at 1 o'clock. Southampton are safe, right?
I don't think so. Not yet. It's a strange one, this one. Normally, I hate the international break with these silly games. But it's actually been quite nice to have a couple of weeks of not worrying about Southampton getting smashed every week in the Premier League. Because we've barely won a game in the last 2 or 3 months in the league. It's actually been quite nice to not have to see that. Obviously, Southampton and Burnley are both on 33 points. We should be safe. We should, barring a remarkable run from Fulham and with the form of Newcastle, we should be safe. But I would be much happier if we could get one more win on the board. Burnley's not a great game for us. We never seem to play that well against Burnley. But having said that, a lot of our players have been playing really well during the international break. And Ralph is normally pretty good. So the manager is normally pretty good during this break because he is a brilliant coach. And he will have been working on things with a lot of the players who were left at the training ground, like Danny Ings. So I'm really hoping that Ings can come back from injury after the international break, bang a couple of goals in, and then we'll be safe. And then all our focus this season is on the FA Cup. We've got a wonderful opportunity to get to the FA Cup final. So the sooner we can get safe in the league, the better.
Yeah, just to add to that, Joe, I think Che Adams was a pretty bright spark and a pretty dismal Scotland side over the international break. And I think hopefully he can carry that over to the club football and take that relatively decent form. It feels mental to think that this is 14th against 15th, considering the conversations we've had over the last few months. I don't really know how to call this one. I think Southampton could, stop the rot a little bit, but also on the other hand, Burnley could easily win this 2-3-0.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, if we play well, then we'll beat them. I'm pretty confident of that. A huge highlight for us in our last game against Bournemouth was the return of Nathan Redmond, who's been dire all season. But when he plays well, he's a phenomenal player for us. He's quick, he scores goals, he's direct. So if he plays well again, then I think there's a good chance that we could take the 3 points.
He plays well in the Cup, Joe. Bournemouth, our championship team. Moving on.
Same as Newcastle.
Massive game.
Will be next season.
Very possible. We'll find out a lot after this game. So Newcastle Tottenham 3 o'clock on Sunday. Quickly going back to what Finno said there about Trent Alexander-Arnold given the time off and relaxing. Newcastle gave the majority of the players 9 days off after the horrific defeat to Brighton. Tottenham had 14 players away on international duty. Reguilon looks like he's a doubt, a left back. That was even before the international break. Callum Wilson and Alain Saint-Maxime look like they're back in for Newcastle. They pictured a training, so that would have given everyone a big boost, anyone that still believes in Steve Bruce. But I don't know which way this is going to go. I mean, you should say Tottenham would win by 3 or 4 goals, judging by the form. It's been a crazy season. I think Newcastle are doomed. I hate to say it, but they've got a half-decent record against Tottenham over the years. Sometimes they pull out, decent results and got a draw down at in London earlier on in the campaign. There has been a kind of a conspiracy theory floating around some of the Newcastle fans, and Finno's caught wind of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've spoken about Mike Ashley, and I think last week we talked about in quite a bit of detail about why Steve Bruce hasn't been sacked. For me, I think Mike Ashley potentially wants the team to get relegated, and not because of the sporting things, but potentially because of this deal in principle that they had or have with the Middle Eastern buyers. Considering that the Premier League is a separate entity to the Football League in terms of their fit and proper persons tests, it could be that there is a deal in principle still there and they're just waiting for that championship to beckon. They take a year's worth of medicine whilst running through this potentially different fit and proper persons test. It's not the most ridiculous theory, and to be honest, it's nowhere near the most outrageous thing that Ashley would have done as owner of Newcastle.
Exactly, Finno. I wouldn't put it past him. I honestly wouldn't. He's obviously very pissed off at what the Premier League did to intervene and to block the sale. The only thing that you might consider this completely bonkers is, wouldn't the price of 350 million, the asking price, considerably drop if Newcastle are a championship club? But he can also point to the fact that they've got this bounce back ability, and every single time Newcastle have gone down, twice in the last 15 years, they've come back up the next season straight away. So it's not beyond the means of possibility. It's actually not. But surely the players are not going to not turn up. They're going to, and they haven't turned up half the season. But surely they're not going to, down tools and go, right, we're going to get walked over by Spurs.
Well, I think there's two things there. I think the difference between, say, 200 million and 350 million to the kinds of people that we're talking about taking over Newcastle United, it's not really a huge issue. I think the players is a good point, but I think also that's more down to the coaching and Steve Bruce. Obviously, the players don't want to go down. Of course they don't. But if you keep a man at the helm where he's actively doing damage to your football club, and it seems to be that he seems to be doing damage to Newcastle, if you speak to most Newcastle fans, it just feels very incongruous as to why you would keep Steve Bruce in the job if you're still wanting to stay in the Premier League.
Strange news coming out of St. James's Park this week also, lads, that Dwight Gale, who hasn't been picked by Newcastle at all really in most of the season, one of the most prolific strikers in the Championship for Newcastle and last season on loan at West Brom, has just signed a 3-year contract. I think that could be investment for the Championship, and also the fact that, look, if you go down, I bet Colin Wilson's got a clause to say, look, I'm off. I'm not hanging around for the Championship, which then Dwight Gale, will stick around with probably Andy Carroll to try and get them back up if that's the case. Football, it's been a crazy season. I've just got a weird feeling Newcastle might somehow miraculously, get something from this game. But you just never know. Anyway, but if that is the case, Mike Ashley, I wouldn't put it past him. Honestly, I wouldn't. He's capable of anything. 5:30 at Villa Park, Aston Villa against Fulham. Huge game for Fulham. Villa, I think, are in that bracket, Finno, we spoke about with Leeds. Even though they had a game in hand, the form's dipped and their season more or less is over. Fulham really might only need, a win and a draw, or another, maybe 2 wins to stay up. The way it's looking, if Newcastle keep going the way they're going. So, most of the time I've watched Fulham in the last 2 or 3 months, they've been really good on the ball. The worst I've seen them was that Leeds game. So I'm sure they would have, Scott Parker would have picked them up and said, look, we still got a chance to stay up. Newcastle are basically sleepwalking towards that relegation zone. And I fancy Fulham to get the win here. Joe?
Yeah, I agree. Like Villa, I don't think they've won once in the last 5 games. I think you're right. They're not going to challenge for Europe. They're not going to go down. They're in that kind of no man's land, aren't they, in the league? I think Fulham will see this as a huge opportunity to get a win. I know I said that before they got smashed by Leeds as well, but I just think away from home, Fulham are quite good. They can kind of, stay in the game and then really kind of attack you on the break. So I think actually fancy Fulham to get something for this from this game, which I know you won't want to hear as a Newcastle fan.
I'm a realist now, Joe.
I just have a sneaky feeling that Fulham are going to go there and win fairly comfortably.
I would even go further, Joe. I think Villa could potentially start to look like a bit of a flash in the pan in the beginning of this season. Because if you think about it, they could drop into the bottom half of the table if Leeds get what is a relatively expected win, and they fail to take a point here. And then you look at next season. So you go, will they have Grealish? Barkley probably goes back to Chelsea. Maybe someone comes in for Konza or Mings, and suddenly that spine of the team that everyone's been waxing lyrical about is no longer there. And do they have the capabilities to replace those players relatively cheaply, considering that they invested so much this season just past? So yeah, I think Aston Villa are in a very precarious position. Maybe not this season, but definitely going into the future.
Grealish is a massive player for them. They've really missed him. I think you're right. He might actually be back, for this one. But just quickly on Barkley there, Finno. I mean, Thomas Tuchel, obviously, he's building his own team and he's got his own ideas and he's done really well so far. I mean, do you think he'd take Barkley back, or instead of maybe investing in someone else, or they got Mason Mount?
I think there's better suitors than Aston Villa, and that's no disrespect to Aston Villa, but I could quite easily see Barkley going to Everton, for example.
Going back to Everton, it was a strange one because when he went to Chelsea, he wasn't exactly, bang on form, and he hasn't really done it for Chelsea. If anything, he's been revived through Lampard in the last few months. But he's done all right for Villa in midfield. He's done all right. I just can't see him staying at Chelsea. I think we'll go for Fulham to definitely win or get something out of this one, lads. Old Trafford 8:30. Manchester United against Brighton. Brighton, fantastic win for them, confidence boosting win. Few goals that they couldn't score in a long time. They hammered Newcastle, could have scored 6 or 7. Man United, want to push Man City. They want to be up there. They're obviously going to win the league, but I'm sure they'll want to finish second and have that, guaranteed Champions League spot finished as early as possible because they still are in the Europa League. I'm not sure who they drew in the Europa League. I know they beat Milan, but anyway, they're obviously the favourites for the Europa League. So they'll want to cement that Champions League spot, and I can see them beating Brighton quite easily.
Yeah, 100%. I think if you're Brighton, this is probably the best time to play Man United, but Man United still are a very strong team. Yeah, I think Man United should quite comfortably see Brighton off.
Yeah, I think you're right, Finn. I think it's one of those ones where there'll be another team who didn't really need this international break going quite nicely. I think we underestimate actually how comfortable Man United are now. It was really good for them that last little period because I think they've got an 8-point cushion, something like that now over fifth, which means really we talk about, don't we? You need 1 point per game advantage to be fairly safe. And I think a couple more wins starting with this one and they're fine. And the only danger would be if they get caught cold. I know Rashford is injured. I think he came back without playing, and there are one or two other little injury niggles about the place. But they look like they've got a fantastic, they've got a very strong squad, haven't they? They've got a lot of depth there, I would say, and I think this would be a very easy one.
Monday night, 7:00, Everton against Crystal Palace. Everton, Finn, are only 3 points behind West Ham, who are in fifth, and they have a game in hand. Of course, West Ham play in the later game. We were raving about Everton earlier on in the season. They started off so well. They had a blip, then they came back. Palace this season is over. They're already on their holidays, I think, and they're not going anywhere. They're certainly not going down. They're not going to make Europe. So, you would fancy Everton to push on. Ancelotti said before, I think, when they got into the top 4, he said, look, I want us to get there and I want us to, to stay there and see how it feels. They've kind of flirted with it, but they haven't been there in a while. I can only see, Everton getting the win and then putting that bit of pressure on West Ham in fifth for that Europa League place.
Yeah, I think I've got all my fingers and toes crossed that Palace can take something from this, but I really don't think they will. And the reason that I don't think they will is pretty much because South America postponed the World Cup qualifiers. So, I think that the international break may help Everton more than most, given the integral part that Rodriguez and Richarlison play in that Everton team. Yeah, I see this as 2-0 Everton, I think, all days long.
The only thing I'd say about that is just watch out for Everton's home form. I think if they'd put together, sort of the same sort of home form as they've done away, they'd be in a lot better position. Actually, I think they beat Southampton at home. But otherwise, I can't remember the last time they won a league game at home, which is odd to say apart from that one. But, I think they're just not, there's something about there, maybe a bit like Liverpool, they've been affected a bit more than some other clubs by the lack of crowd or something like that. But Ancelotti recognised it this week. I saw in an interview where he said, we definitely got to get more consistent. Yeah, I think it should be a tasty game, but just because of that slightly dodgy home record, I wouldn't put all my money on this one.
Final game of the weekend, lads. Monday night, 9:15. Wolves at home to West Ham. Wolves are also in limbo. Finno, West Ham have been one of the stories of the season, and they really could. A win here puts you. Chelsea obviously lose, which they probably won't. Put you back into the top 4. I mean, it would be amazing. An amazing story if West Ham were to finish in the Champions League places. But I would actually fancy West Ham to get the 3 points at Wolves.
Yeah, I don't care about the performance. I don't care how many goals we score. I only care about the result. And if you cast your mind back to I think it was the third game of the season, we played Wolves at the London Stadium and we battered them 4-0 in what at the time seemed like an excellent result to kind of kickstart our season. Again, Wolves have little to play for. West Ham do still have the allure of Europe, so fingers crossed that West Ham can get the result, but honestly, couldn't care how it comes.
I think it depends which West Ham turns up. Is it the West Ham that goes 3-0 up against Arsenal, or the West Ham that then concedes 3 goals against us?
100%.
No, I think they've been very consistent, for a lot of the season. Hard to beat West Ham, and that core strength they have from Antonio, definitely up front, and obviously the centre halves are, and the goalkeeper and midfield, they're strong West Ham. So I think they probably deserve it, maybe on merit, but I just think Chelsea found form at the right time, and this could obviously go to the wire. But West Ham are definitely the best of the rest. Right, lads, that rounds it off. No Paul, Kev, no?
No, that's you spared some doggerel for another 7 days.
No worries, man, no worries. Okay, guys, that rounds it off for the weekend. Don't forget, check out our YouTube channel. Myself and Joe had a brilliant chat with ex-Newcastle, Tottenham, Norwich and West Brom Premier League legend Rule Fox. Really good stuff, Joe. He spoke about, obviously beating Bayern Munich, David Ginola's hair, getting locked in the toilet at half-time, playing up at Newcastle, the Spurs and Arsenal derby, the atmosphere. I really enjoyed it.
Really good chat. Yeah, he had lots of interesting stories, and you kind of forget what an amazing career he had. He played for some massive teams in some huge games, and yeah, really, really interesting guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonder how he was never capped by England, but he was always in the top 4 or 5 Premier League wingers every season. Unbelievable supplier of the ball and goal scorer and everything else. But yeah, give that a listen, guys, on our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot for listening. Don't forget to hit subscribe as well, and enjoy the games. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more of our podcasts, please click on the red subscribe button on the bottom right-hand side. Thank you.